Have you ever felt that shiver down your spine when you're alone on a deserted road? I never imagined that a simple journey along the A82 in Scotland would turn into the most terrifying nightmare of my life. Before starting this macabre tale, activate the bell, leave your like, and tell me in the comments if you've had any supernatural experiences on deserted roads. Believe me, after this story, you'll never want to drive alone at night again. It was a typical foggy night in Glasgow when I decided to take the road to Fort William. As a night photographer, I was used to the dark landscapes of the Highlands, but nothing prepared me for what was to come. The A82 was completely deserted, as you'd expect at 3 a.m. The typical Scottish fog was thicker than usual, reducing my visibility to just a few meters. My old Vauxhall Astra cut through the silence of the night, and the only sound was the engine and the fine rain hitting the windscreen. Passing Loch Lomond, I began to notice something strange. The radio, which had previously been playing classics, FM, began to emit a disturbing static. I tried to change the station, but all I could pick up was that annoying noise, which gradually began to turn into something that sounded like footsteps. That's when I realized that the footsteps weren't coming from the radio. They were real, echoing on the wet tarmac. But how? I was alone on the road. There were no other cars in sight, and that sound was getting closer and closer. What really terrified me was when I looked in the rearview mirror. In the mist, I could make out a silhouette. She was tall, slim, and seemed to be wearing a traditional Scottish kilt, but there was something wrong with her shape. It moved unnaturally, as if it were floating on the tarmac, but the footsteps kept getting louder. Can you imagine the terror of being alone on a dark road, hearing footsteps approaching, even though you're in the car? Keep watching, because what happened next completely changed my life. I remembered the old stories my grandmother used to tell me about the Highland walker, a spirit who supposedly stalked lonely travelers on the roads of the Highlands. I'd always thought they were just legends to scare children, but at that moment, all my skepticism began to crumble. When I tried to accelerate the car to get away from that presence, something even more inexplicable happened. But before I tell you what it was, I need you to understand why that particular road had such a dark history. Let me know in the comments if you know any legends from the Scottish Highlands. This story still makes me lose sleep. What happened next made me question everything I believed about the supernatural world. I pressed down hard on the accelerator, but the Vauxhall began to lose power. The speedometer read 60, 50, 40 mph. It was inexplicably slowing down. The car's dashboard began to flash, and the smell, a putrid odor of wet peat and something older, more morbid, invaded the interior of the vehicle. At that moment, I remembered the research I had done on the A82. This road was built on ancient Highland routes, paths that the clans used during the massacres of the 18th century. The Glencoe massacre itself is said to have left supernatural scars in this region. The figure in the rearview mirror was closer now. I could see details that make me shudder just remembering them. His kilt wasn't made of traditional tartan, but appeared to be decomposing, dripping a dark substance onto the tarmac. His face was a mask of agony frozen in time. Have you ever had that feeling that something is completely wrong, even if you can't explain why? Let us know in the comments if you've ever had an experience like that. The car finally stopped, right next to Glencoe, the exact spot where, centuries ago, dozens of members of Clan MacDonald were brutally murdered. The lights on the dashboard went out completely, and the silence, that deafening silence, was broken only by the footsteps that were now beside the driver's door. I tried to lock the doors, but the electrical systems wouldn't respond. The glass began to freeze from the inside, forming patterns that resembled ancient Celtic symbols. The cold, a supernatural cold that penetrated to the bone. It was then that I realized I was standing exactly where, according to legend, the last survivor of the massacre was last seen. They say he wandered for days in the snow, swearing eternal vengeance on any traveler who dared disturb the rest of the dead. When that pale, decayed hand touched the car window, I realized I was about to discover why no lone driver should pass through Glencoe after midnight. If you're watching this at night, you might want to switch the lights on now. What happened next is so disturbing that many refuse to believe it. Before I continue, I must warn you, this story contains details that may disturb the most sensitive. If you're brave enough, keep watching to discover the true horror that awaited me. What comes next has completely changed my perspective on the supernatural world. My hands shake just remembering what happened when that creature started talking. The voice I heard wasn't human. It was as if thousands of agonized whispers were speaking in unison in an ancient form of Scottish Gaelic. But the most terrifying thing, I could understand every word, even though I had never studied the language. "You're on our territory now, photographer," the voice reverberated inside my head. The being pressed its face against the glass, and I could see that its eyes were endless black pits, like the very depths of Loch Ness. Imagine the terror of being trapped in a car on a dark road with a supernatural creature that knows exactly who you are. Let me know in the comments if you'd still drive at night after that. The inside of the car was now completely covered in ice, and I could see my own breath freezing in the air. The creature began to tell a story about how the ancient clans made pacts with forces beyond human comprehension to protect their lands. Every bit of this road, the entity continued, was built on blood and oaths. The MacDonald weren't just massacred, they were sacrificed. And now you've crossed our sacred border with your cameras and modern lights. It was then that I noticed something even more terrifying. Through the frozen windscreen, I could see other figures emerging from the mist, dozens of them, all wearing decaying kilts. Some still carrying the old blood-stained claymores. "You came for images of the Highlands," the voice continued, "but the Highlands chose you. Now, you'll have to make a choice. Have you ever wondered why some of the most famous pictures of the Highlands seem to have something strange in the shadows? Keep watching to discover the true price of photographing these ancient places." The creature then stretched its decayed hand through the glass as if it didn't exist, touching my camera. The equipment began to emit a sickly greenish glow, and the images in the viewfinder. God, those images! What I saw in that viewfinder permanently changed my perception of reality. But the real horror was just beginning. The choice I had to make that night still haunts me, and the consequences, well, you need to understand why today I only photograph during the day. What happened next is so disturbing that it completely changed the laws that I believed governed our reality. There's a reason why some photographs should never be revealed, and today, for the first time, I'm going to tell you what really happened that night. The creature offered me a macabre pact. Through those images in the camera's viewfinder, I saw things that no human being should witness. Ancient Highland ceremonies, forgotten sacrifices, and hidden truths about Scotland's history that should remain buried. "You can keep your life," whispered the entity, "but you must become our guardian. Every photograph you take in the Highlands will carry our mark, our true history. Have you noticed how some photographs of old places look different, like there's something in the shadows watching? Let me know in the comments if you've ever captured something inexplicable in your photos." With trembling hands, I accepted the pact. The being pressed its decomposed fingers against my forehead, and I felt excruciating pain as ancient symbols were carved into my soul. My camera began to pulsate with a greenish light, and through the lens, I now see the world as they do. Since that night, every photograph I take in the Highlands reveals more than it should. Sometimes I capture ancient battles taking place in the background. Other times, agonized faces appear on the stones of castles. The worst thing is not the visions, but the knowledge. Now I know why certain areas of the Highlands are avoided by the locals, why some lakes never freeze, even in the harshest winter, why some ruins still echo with ancient cries, and that creature, it never really left me. Sometimes when I'm developing photos in the darkroom, I hear those footsteps again, and in the reflection of the developing chemicals, I see those black eyes watching me. So, if you're ever driving along the A82 after midnight and you hear footsteps on the tarmac, don't stop. Don't look back, and for God's sake, don't take any photographs. This is just one of the many stories I carry with me as Keeper of the Highlands. If you want to know more dark secrets of these ancient places, activate the bell and subscribe to the channel. Every night of the new moon, I reveal a new story that will change your perspective on the world we know.